Hello and welcome back to yet another video in the series where I am constructing the Feywild to be a playable realm for a D&D party. Most of the series has consisted of me talking about the Feywild in general or certain archfey or NPCs, but last week I talked about 5 potential encounters or storylines to include based off medieval literature. It popped off a little bit. The video did really well, which was very exciting for me, and I also loved making it. And I have more medieval literature to talk about. Some that I'm just, I have things to tell you. Do I? Now, normally I start these videos with the idea of the week, just where I highlight an idea that I thought was particularly cool and creative, but this week I'm going to integrate it into the video content because it's so good. It's so good. Now, a lot of this literature I am pulling from my grad school classes. I'm also currently in a class on knighthood, and we were just reading Gawain and the Green Knight, or Gawain and the Green Knight. I should technically say Gawain. I read it back in undergrad, but I'd seen the movie since then that came out in I think 2001, and then I reread it. Had no idea how different it was from the movie, totally forgot. So first I'm going to talk about Gawain and the Green Knight, and specifically the literary version, although I'll touch on the movie as well. I'm then going to talk about Marie de France's lay or poem about a Bisclavret, or I guess Bisclavret, she's French. Bisclavret or Bisclavret meaning the werewolf. And then I'm going to get to the classic, the timeless Beowulf. So without further ado, here are several more medieval encounters to include in your Feywild campaign. First, Sir Gawain and the Green Knight. This is actually kind of a Christmas story because that's the day it starts on, is I think Christmas Eve or Christmas Day, one or the other. And King Arthur is impatient. He wants something entertaining to happen before he can sit down to his meal. And lo and behold, as soon as he asks for something like that to happen, a green knight appears in the doorway. By green knight, it means green knight. His skin is green, his hair is green, his armor is green, his weapons are green, everything is green. Now, knights love chivalry, and they love games. They specifically love games that aren't a form of warfare. It would be unchivalrous and against the code of honor to go into a game like a joust and intend actual harm or retribution to be done. These are games. But the Green Knight offers to play a game that doesn't really feel like a true game. He has a battle axe, and he offers it out to anyone who would strike him with it, as long as they agree that in exactly 1 year's time, he can return the exact same strike to them. The court's sort of taken aback by this, and they don't want to do it, and so Arthur steps forward to the plate, but people are like, whoa, kind of a bad idea, because Arthur brings up the idea of just cutting off the man's head. And then his nephew decides, you know what? I'll do it. I'm not very important anyway. The nephew then cuts off the Green Knight's head, which rolls to the floor and continues to speak. The Green Knight picks his head back up, reminds Gawain of the deal they'd made, that Gawain would then receive that very stroke in a year, and leaves. In 1 year's time, Gawain sets off on this quest. It is a very long, hard journey. He fights different monsters on the way there, and he finally reaches a beautiful castle where he can have some rest. And the man of that castle and all his servants and his wife welcome him and treat him like an honored guest. Gawain finds out that the chapel is only like a half day away, so he decides to stay for 3 days that he has. The man of the house decides that he wants to go hunting for 3 days. And for each day he goes hunting, whatever Gawain earns at his home, they exchange the best thing that they won or found. And it's this tale of potential seduction, and Gawain is tested by the man's wife who wants to sleep with him, and he's able to offer the man kisses, but he never actually sleeps with the wife. But then on the 3rd day, the wife gives him a belt that guarantees he will never die by a man's stroke. Lo and behold, he goes to the Green Knight, flinches like once, and admonished for it because the Green Knight's like, hey, I didn't flinch for you, man. And so Gawain just decides to go to his death like a man, wears the belt hoping it'll work, and the Green Knight actually doesn't even try to cut off his head. He just gives him a nick on the neck. The knight then explains that he was actually the man of the house in disguise and appreciates that Gawain didn't sleep with his wife. A small note, the movie sort of implies that like Gawain has to cut off the knight's head and Gawain is tricked, but I didn't really love that, and I also didn't like that Gawain does sort of fall to the wife's temptations in the movie, and then the end is just so dire and hopeless, but these stories were fun. These knights gained honor. These are like good stories. Gawain gets to go home a hero who has done something with his life. That's sort of besides the point, but yeah, I don't really like it when movies like make things dark and sad because it feels literary. I'm like, why can't we just have like a fun, weird ending where like Gawain actually has some honor and does a cool thing? Like, why can't we have like a moderately happy ending? Whatever. Now, Dungeons and Dragons, because that's why you're here. Obviously, I'm going to recommend having a Green Knight in your campaign, and here's where the comment of the week comes in. Okay, so the user S Memory suggested, so could Order of Ancients Paladins pledge loyalty to Oberon? They're known as Green Knights. I never really looked into Paladins before, and so I looked into Oath of the Ancients Paladins. Here's what the player's handbook says about them. The Oath of the Ancients is as old as the race of elves and the rituals of the druids. Sometimes called Fey Knights, Green Knights, or Horned Knights, paladins who swear this oath cast their lot with the side of the light in the cosmic struggle against darkness because they love the beautiful and life-giving things of the world, not necessarily because they believe in principles of honor, courage, and justice. They adorn their armor and clothing with images of growing things, leaves, antlers, or flowers to reflect their commitment to preserving life and light in the world. And then this. At level 20, you can assume the form of an ancient force of nature, taking on an appearance you choose. For example, your skin might turn green or take on a bark-like texture, your hair might become leafy or moss-like, or you might sprout antlers or a lion-like mane. Tell me that's not inspired by Gawain and the Green Knight. You can't. Forgive me for slightly going off topic again, but here's why that's so exciting to me. Like I said, I'm in a class on knighthood, and in this class, I have a term paper. It's in Master of English, and my professor has not just approved, but encouraged a paper about how medieval literature has impacted modern day Dungeons and Dragons. It's the coolest thing ever. I don't know what else to say. So if you have any other gems like this, you could help a girl out with her term paper. So thank you to this user. I think that's fantastic. I think it'd be so fun to have a paladin like this in your party in the Feywild, but also, if none of your player characters have it, have a Green Knight in the campaign. If you want to stick to source book, this guy's gonna be like level 20. That's powerful stuff. Could be a high level encounter if you want to make him evil, but he could also just be a loyal high servant of Oberon the Green Lord. He could be an ally, he could be a way to test the party, like through offering the exact same deal that the Green Knights did for Gawain. He could say, here, this is my axe. You can keep it as long as you agree that whatever you do to me with it, I can do to you in a year. You must hit me at least once with it. And hopefully the party isn't as sadistic as trying to cut off his head, in which case you'd probably need a way to preserve the knight. Campaigns also don't always last like a year or so it could be more like in a week or in a month, I'm going to return to you and I expect to be able to hit you back with this thing. And the party could be gaining a powerful item. This could be a +1 or 2 great axe, or it could be cursed. I love a cursed item, but it could also have any other sort of magical properties that you feel like would benefit your party or wherever they're at in the campaign. That's just something that's so personal, you know? I don't know what your people need, but you do. And I can't help but think that this would also be a really cool Christmas one-shot. Like, have a Christmas celebration where this guy shows up and freaks everyone out, and then maybe like the party has to hunt him down a year later. You like skip a year and they have to go find the guy and they like have encounters on the way. I don't know, I feel like you'd have to workshop it to make it work, but you know, it's kind of late for Christmas stuff too, but it could be cool, okay? And by the way, if you two want to become comment of the week, then comment below your ideas or thoughts about these encounters or others that you have out on your own or how you might use them. I love all the ideas. So there's that little spiel. I'm kind of hyped up today, can you tell? Next medieval literature to inspire you is Marie de France's Bisclavret. I'm going to pronounce it Bisclavret because the way the poem rhymes implies that's the pronunciation, but I could be totally wrong. I don't speak French. Marie de France wrote Bisclavret, or The Werewolf, about a werewolf, which she also calls garwolves in the poem. She writes, "A garwolf is a savage beast, while the Furies on it, at least. Eats men, wreaks evil, does no good, living and roaming in the deep wood." Here's your summary. A handsome, noble knight marries a beautiful, noble lady, but 3 days of the month he disappears, and she doesn't know where. She begs him to tell her. She thinks he's cheating on her, and tells him that would be a bad thing to do, and so he finally tells her. He says, okay, for 3 days I turn into a werewolf. And she says, well, what, are you just running around naked? And he's like, no, but I know I had to hide certain clothes in a certain location because if I can't get back to them, then I can never transform back. She is totally freaked out by the werewolf thing. She like immediately never wants to be next to him again. And she's like, oh, I love you so much. You can trust me with anything. Where do you keep your clothes? He finally tells her under a bush at a chapel. By the way, the knight in this poem is called Bisclavret. That's just like his name. So the wife reaches out to another knight who's been pining after her, begs him to help her. She like no longer wants to be with Bisclavret. And so that knight goes and steals the clothes for her, and when Bisclavret goes off and turns into a werewolf, he is unable to turn back and never returns. She and the rest of the community presume him dead, and she gets to marry this new knight. All seems to be well. We skip forward a year. Well, all seems to be well except for Bisclavret. Sucks for him. About a year later, the king is on a hunt, and he starts to hunt Bisclavret, our very own. Bisclavret basically begs him for mercy. He goes up to the king's stirrup and like kisses his feet and can't communicate, but the king's like, hold on, don't kill this thing. I love it. I'm guessing that like once the 3 days wore off, Bisclavret had his mind. He just couldn't transform back his physical body, and that's why he's not a monster who tries to kill the king. Bisclavret becomes like a prized pet, and everyone loves him. They think he's the best. And he's never violent until that knight who married his wife shows up at the castle one time for a banquet, and Bisclavret attacks the knight. They're like, whoa, what happened there? And they're like, I don't know, must be some old grudge. And the knight just like leaves. And then the next day, the king goes on another hunting trip. Bisclavret goes with him everywhere at this point. And while on this hunting trip, he's in the realm of that noble woman who used to be married to Bisclavret. And so she goes and presents herself to the king. Bisclavret sees her and bites her nose off. It specifically says, listen now to his fine vengeance. He tore her nose right off her face. They almost put Bisclavret down at this point because they're like, that's excessive. And then they realize this woman's married to the guy he attacked yesterday. So then they torture her until she tells them what happened, which of course she does. She's being tortured. They make her return his clothes. Bisclavret turns back. He is like given land and wealth and is loved by the king. The wife is expelled from the kingdom entirely, and the children she has after that point don't have noses. D&D. Obviously werewolves exist. We have their natures. We have all sorts of lycanthropy stuff. I sort of have two ideas to pull from this. One, you could have a king in the Feywild who has a werewolf pet. That is so quintessential chaos. That is absolutely Feywild. I think it would be really great, and maybe it's a werewolf who did get stuck in that form and can't get back. Maybe the party like has to go on a mission to help him. There's like a certain item that'll help this werewolf transform back, and the king commissions them to go get it. You could absolutely do something like that. I also really like the idea of them meeting an NPC who had her nose bit off and whose children all have their noses missing. I also want to tell you about a one-shot I did recently that involved werewolves and royalty. Basically, my party was invited by a princess via weird letter where she was basically like, hi, cousin, I would love if you would come comfort me in this very stressful time. And so the party gets a few hints about something that might be going on. They know something's wrong. They show up to this wedding, pretend to be distant cousins of the royal family, sort of like weasel their way in. And while there, they sort of realize that the family marrying into the royal family is a bunch of werewolves. I had two plot lines going on here. One, the princess was actually a wizard who'd been sort of like potion mind addled so that she wouldn't really fully understand what was going on. And so her goal is to escape. But also, this is an attempted werewolf incursion where they are trying to infect the wedding wine with their blood and basically turn all of these royal families in the region into werewolves. Did I say vampire? I feel like I said vampire at some point. The party I ran it for was able to get the princess off the castle grounds and stop the wine being distributed, all without like ever being found out that they weren't the cousins. They were on stealth mode. It was great. The next text I want to offer you for some inspiration is Beowulf. Beowulf is one of the oldest, if not the oldest text we have in English. Of course, I'm not talking about modern English, but I'm pretty sure it's the first. Or like the first written down, the first we have record of. These things are hard to track because oral stories were a thing for so long. Here is the quick version of Beowulf, because this isn't just a short poem, this is like a long epic poem. So in Beowulf, there is a hero, Beowulf, who travels off to a kingdom where the king is like, hey, there's a monster coming to the hall every night, killing and eating us. I would rather that not be happening. Can you kill it? Beowulf says yes. He lies in wait. The monster, also called Grendel, shows up that night. Beowulf gets into it with him, kills Grendel. Things are good. But that is only one of 3 situations in this poem, because Grendel has a mother and she is very upset that Grendel's been killed. Grendel's mom shows up the next night, absolutely ravages the place. I don't remember why Beowulf can't kill her then and there, if he's not there, or if he's asleep, I can't remember. But then she like drags a person off to her lair, where Beowulf has to go track her down, realizes it's an underwater lair, and while he's under there and fighting her, he finds a magical sword that empowers him to kill her. Years later, I think it's like 50 years later, Beowulf is old. He has become a king himself. A dragon is attacking his kingdom. This is sort of like Beowulf's last stand, where he fights off the dragon and he manages to kill it, but he suffers a mortal wound to the neck. The dragon has bit his neck and injected him with poison. Now, besides the fact that his neck has been impaled by a big dragon's mouth and injected with poison, Beowulf does give a several-page monologue at the end of his life. I taught this play to seniors and they're like, why is he still talking? He should be dead. And eventually he is dead. There ends the saga of Beowulf. I've used this word already, but this is quintessential Dungeons and Dragons. You have a monster, you have a hero, you have a magic sword, and in the end you have a big poisonous dragon. The Feywild element I would want to encourage here is the idea that Grendel and his mom can speak common. There's a sort of humanity in their monstrousness, and I think you could have any sort of, I don't know, there's not like a particular monster that comes to mind besides like a werewolf as like a furry beast, but I feel like you could have some sort of like fey creature attacking this realm, which would also make sense because after the party kills the initial creature, that creature's mother might be seeking retribution to even out the balance that's been upset in this Feywild world. She may feel that a life is owed to her. That being said, this could like also totally be a material realm thing. It could go either way. But yeah, have the party show up, help out a king or important being who's being attacked nightly, kill the monster, and then have them stay and face another monster that night that they don't realize is going to come attack them too, or have them move on from this place and have the mother of this monster start to track them down. Or they could know that a monster has dragged a being to its underwater lair. They need to go rescue that creature. And while they're down there, they could get a magical sword. As always, these medieval texts tend to have like magical items in it that assist the heroes. And so yeah, cool magic sword that like helps them kill the monster. This is a spoiler for Wild Beyond the Witchlight, the new Feywild campaign, but there is a sentient sword there called Snickersnack that loves to chop off heads. And if you roll a nat 20, you chop off the head of the creature you're fighting, if it has one. So you could do something like that. A sword that like loves to kill aquatic monsters. I don't know. And do I have to say it? Dragon. I know some people have come up with options for Fey dragons, and again, Wild Beyond the Witchlight, big spoiler, there is a monster that's dragon-like called the Jabberwock. So we know there's a Jabberwock in the Feywild, but I want to have some sort of like other bigger beast. I'm trying to sort of develop a dragon now for like a bigger campaign. I like the idea of making it a poison dragon, but I would want it to be Fey. And so I'm trying to consider how I would make it more chaotic, maybe add some psychedelic components to it. The Feywild is notorious for having people get lost, having people go mad. So maybe there's a dragon out there that has some sort of like mind-bending abilities or ways to sort of encourage that lostness. Or maybe it like preys upon the lost or wants to cause more lost people to get to the Feywild. That's sort of like over the garden wall. I don't know. If any of you have ideas for a Feywild dragon, let me know below. I would love to hear them. I'm not in a hurry, so I want to make sure I get it right. I hope this video was helpful to you. I can't do this specific topic every single week because I've just gone through a lot of big medieval literature, but I am going to keep going with the Feywild trend. I have a few ideas that I could pull from right now, and if there's anything else to do with the Feywild, or I guess D&D in general, leave a comment below, let me know so I can add it to my list of like potential things to talk about. I've been having a lot of fun with this. It was so exciting last week that people seemed to really enjoy the video, and I hope this one was just as helpful and enjoyable as last week's. Anyway, have a fantastic whatever it is. Like, subscribe, I should say that, and I hope to see you next week.